What if I told you Sunday's make or break drama didn't end on the field, but in the group chat? A flag here, a late whistle there, and suddenly half the internet is certain the whole league is playing theater. By the time the dust settled on week 10, two games had become viral conspiracies: Dolphins versus Bills and Bucs versus Patriots, and fans were yelling the same thing from different timelines. They rigged it. TheSpun.com, it starts small. A sack where the defender gets flagged for taunting. A long drive erased by an offensive pass interference call that looks like two players breathing on each other. On the surface, those moments look like isolated mistakes. In the minds of watching fans, they add together into a pattern. Referees nudging outcomes, the league protecting marquee teams, sportsbooks tilting odds. Social feeds fill with slow-motion loops, overlays, and the kind of righteous fury that makes viewers certain they've seen The Matrix. That's how a handful of whistles morph into a crowd-wide indictment. Yardbarker. Let's be fair to what actually happened on Sunday. In Miami, a sequence of gamesmanship calls and timing quirks, including a taunting flag that many felt was dubious, lit the fuse. People pointed fingers and posted clips that looked, on first blush, like referees manufacturing drama to keep the game within reach for one side. In New England, a huge offensive pass interference penalty erased a Bucs drive, and the clip replayed in feeds as the canonical example of late, inconsistent officiating. Those two flags didn't decide every game, but they moved the scoreboard enough to convince people something systemic was happening. Yardbarker now, add another, noisier ingredient: sports gambling. This is where the story stops being just about a handful of calls and starts sounding like a house built on rumors. The legal betting market has exploded in the last few years, and with it came a culture that constantly measures every whistle against lines and payouts. When money is riding on short swings, props, spreads, player totals, every call becomes not only a competitive moment, but a financial one. That doesn't mean officials are colluding. It means that fans who bet feel losses as personal injuries, and social media hands them a megaphone. The moral panic is real and in part predictable. Bloomberg, so what's real and what's rage? First, officials are fallible, not omnipotent. They work in split seconds with camera angles that sometimes lie and a rule book that is maddeningly specific. The league's guidelines on taunting, OPI, and roughing the passer have become surgical. Certain finishes, certain body weight placements, certain gestures all trigger penalties. Applied strictly, the rules can feel absurd in the flow of a play. Applied loosely, the game looks lawless. The middle ground is thin, and that's where most of the outrage forms. People see the referee's flag as intent, when often it's a fast technical interpretation of a clause written in ink. Yardbarker second. Conspiracy is contagious. Once a theory takes hold, refs are protecting the Bills, or the league needs more drama for TV. Confirmation bias does the rest. Every close play afterward becomes ammunition. You'll find threads on Reddit and clips on X where fans stitch together three unrelated calls and present them as a stitched plot. It's emotionally satisfying. Someone to blame, someone to fight. But it's also how misinformation cements. Pattern-seeking brains prefer narrative to nuance. Reddit third. There is a policy problem. Leagues know this. The NFL, like other sports bodies, has tightened gambling rules and reminded players and staff about integrity commitments. The sport has also shown it can be reactive, handing out fines, publicly explaining calls, and occasionally changing language in the rulebook after a sustained outcry. But public explanations are rarely enough. Fans want transparency that feels surgical. Clear video breakdowns, consistent pool report explanations, and a referee accountability system that isn't a black box. Right now, the league gives answers only sometimes, and ambiguity fuels suspicion. AP News. So what would calm this storm? A few practical moves would help. Faster, clearer post-game explanations from officiating crews, an independent audit of questionable calls that's released to the public, and better education for viewers on the letter versus spirit of rules. The league could also publish more referees, pool reports, and angle-based clips that show why a flag was thrown. None of this removes error. Humans still make them, but it makes the process less mysterious, and mystery is the oxygen conspiracy breathes. 985ththesportshub.com. There's also a cultural fix. Fans and bettors alike need to remember how fragile narratives are. Sports betting changes the feeling of a loss from disappointment to outrage. The louder the financial stake, the easier it is to interpret mistakes as malice. That doesn't absolve officiating of criticism, accountability matters, but it reframes some of the rage as an understandable, if misdirected, emotional response to losing money and pride in the same breath. The Spire, here's the honest, slightly unsatisfying truth. Most of the time, bad calls are exactly that, bad calls. A referee's human error, an angle that hit a crucial hand, a rule that reads clearly in a binder but messily in motion. Sometimes, however, you'll find patterns worth investigating. Leagues have been caught before, individuals fired, suspensions handed down, and when there's smoke, probing matters. But suspicion should lead to investigation, not to mass hysteria. If something systemic is happening, we want evidence. If it's human fallibility, we want correction and clarity. The last act of this argument plays out off the field. Does the NFL invest in transparency and independent review? Do networks and teams push for clearer communication? Do bettors learn to treat officiating variance like any other source of risk? Answer those, and you change how Sunday afternoons sound on the internet. You put a dampener on the fever, and you give referees and players a chance to be judged less by highlight loops and more by measurable patterns. Fans will always cry foul. It's in the sport's DNA. We cheer, we gasp, we accuse. That energy is part of what makes football religious to many. But conspiracies that replace scrutiny with certainty are dangerous. They corrode trust without offering solutions. If you want the simplest takeaway from Week 10's uproar, it's this. Demand transparency, not a verdict. Ask for clarity, not headlines. We should hold the league accountable. We should also hold our rush to conspiracy to the same standard. Final image, a stadium at dusk, a replay loop playing on 1,000 phones, and a crowd arguing in halves, half convinced the game was fixed, half convinced it was human error. Somewhere between those halves sits what the sport needs most right now: facts, explanation, and a willingness to trade outrage for answers. 2 Week 10 games produce the same reaction from fans: anger, disbelief, and the old shortcut everyone yells when the refs make a big, controversial call. The NFL is rigged. The two matchups generating the most heat were Miami versus Buffalo and Tampa Bay versus New England, and both featured late flags that dramatically altered drives and momentum. Start with Miami and Buffalo. Viewers zeroed in on a taunting, unsportsmanlike sequence that came at a critical moment while the Dolphins and Bills were trading punches. Social feeds exploded with accusations that the refs invented a taunting call out of thin air, and the outrage peaked when Buffalo answered with points shortly after. The clip looped everywhere. Fans saw a small gesture, the flag, and then a swing in momentum. That combination is the exact fuel conspiracy theories feed on. Over in Tampa, a Buccaneers drive died when officials threw a massive offensive pass interference flag near midfield.